Hello everybody and welcome to another video. In this video I am going to be painting up some worn leather using one of the new miniatures from the new Cities of Sigmar range. And here it is. This is one of the new miniatures. I do not know the name of this offhand straight away, but I have primed this black. And we're really going to be concentrating on the rear of this miniature and sort of really doing like a really cool looking worn leather. So starting off straight away, what we're going to do is we're going to base coat all of the leather areas with Games Workshop's Rhinox hide. I've just added a little bit of water to this, not too much. And just to get like a nice solid base coat. So you may need at least 2 layers, but Rhinox hide is not bad for going over black, so you should be fine. Just a quick thank you to everybody who has supported me lately. The channel is over 2,000 subscribers now, which is amazing. Still about 70% of my viewers have not subscribed yet, so if you're one of them, please hit that subscription button. Liking and comment on the videos really helps. And yeah, there's and ring the bell. It's really good. There's going to be stuff coming on Patreon, so I'm going to start plugging my Patreon a little bit more. I don't really like doing it. You know, it's there if you want to help me, but for anyone that does want to help me, I'm going to start putting some videos up there. It won't be all the time. Because I'm not a big fan of content behind paywalls. So what we're going to be doing now is basically we're going to be essentially wet into wet blending with some Mournfang brown and Rhinox hide. So you can see me putting the Rhinox hide in, and this is the Mournfang brown. So it's basically wet into wet blending. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it in and kind of mix the paint together to build up the highlights for where I want it. Try to make sure between each application of this that you let the first layer dry fully before you sort of like add more in. This is still quite wet, so you'll see me sort of going back into it again because it is still wet. If it was sort of starting to dry, which you'll see because the shine will start disappearing, then don't do it. Let it fully dry and then go back in again with some more paint. But just the more you do, the more of the blend you will achieve. And yeah, just basically the best thing to do with the whole blending thing in wet into wet is try to be as quick as you possibly can. You don't have to do this. You can mix the paint on the palette and do it as a layer and just build up thin layers of the different tones of the mix if you feel more confident doing that way. I did it this way because I just found it really quickly. I have to say I am absolutely loving the new Cities of Sigmar kits. The whole box is really good, but the range is so beautiful. And there's so many cool options. Like one of the options that you get in the Cavalier kit is the helmets can either have the visors up or down. It kind of comes in 2 parts, and you kind of choose which visor you want with the head, and then you can have the visor down or you can have the visor up. Such a really nice little touch. So as you can see here, the paint is still wet at this point. So what I've done is I've just put a little bit of Mournfang brown over the top, and then I've got my brushes a bit damp, and I'm just going to sort of feather that in. And this is me just cleaning my brush off now, and then I'm just feathering that in just to sort of spread that paint out. There's going to be a couple of glazes over the top of this and a lot more paint stippled over the top to build up the highlights. So just to take your time, and if it does dry, like I said, just do a little bit of a 50-50 mix, however you think it is, and then stick that on and then just build it up. And practice on like an old base or an old shield or something like that, and you'll get your head round how the wet into wet blending works. If you want me to do a specific video for wet into wet blending, drop a comment below, and if I get enough comments about it, then I'll make the video. So here you see I'm just putting over a 50-50 mix of Rhinox hide and black, and it's kind of like a wash, almost like a heavy glaze, and I'm literally just going over that area. And what I want that to do is I want it to sort of like smooth out all of the transitions between the Mournfang brown and the Rhinox hide, so it's kind of sort of like blends it all in, and sort of like brings it down a little bit, because this is not really the texture, this is more just the light in the base tone. And once this is done, if the more you glaze over the top, you'll see this sort of work. So here I am now actually now starting to push the highlights. So this is a 50-50 mix of Mournfang brown and Rhinox hide. It's probably a little bit more Mournfang brown because it's a little bit brighter. And what I'm doing here is I'm just stippling this on to where I'd worked in the highlights with the previous blending, and this is the sort of just the stippling will sort of build up the sort of the transitions and the highlights. And also as well that this model has a lot of sculpted detail on the leather, like cracks and lines, so I'm kind of just working around them, so I'm not stippling into the sort of indentations on the leather, sort of around the edges of them and sort of building up those highlights around them. You'll see as I go that I'll continue working this with different brightnesses of paint, and I'll be stippling that on in those predominant areas to build up the highlights. So now that this is like an almost pure Mournfang brown tone, and as you can see I'm really concentrating this on the most upper parts, and again it's still stippling, so what that'll do is it'll have the previous base tone and the first set of stippling layers will sort of still be shown through this, and it'll build up that texture and the different layers of color inside the leather. Now for the belt that's over his shoulder, the big leather belt, I do have another leather tutorial on the channel. I'll basically be doing that belt the same way as I did that tutorial. This is more for a more heavily worn sort of leather look, if that's what you want to go for. The process for this didn't take too long. It took like an hour and a half of full painting just to get this, the front and the back and the side of this leather done. So here I am again. It's the same mix, just coming back in and stippling it on, just building up those layers and the different brightnesses between all of the different layers. Really should write scripts before I do this, especially for things like this. But hopefully you'll get the rough idea of what I'm trying to do. So this is now what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of XV88 into the Mournfang brown, and now I'm really focusing on the upper parts of the leather, so really sort of on his arse and then down those folds, really emphasizing that. We're going to be doing a bit more glazing later on, just sort of tie all of this together. So, you know, just go steady, go slow, take your time with it, and you'll slowly see this work. But the good thing is with this type of technique is even if you're really messy, a couple of glazes will fix where the shadows are and the highlights. And mess is fine because, you know, it's meant to be worn, busted up leather, so it works perfectly well. Also, you'll see me every now and again to sort of like do a little edge highlight around the sort of symbols and stuff at the bottom of the apron. Um, they'll build up slowly as I progress through the different highlights, and it'll kind of just sort of make them stand out a little bit more, but kind of try to keep the darkness of the inside. And if you do sort of get paint on the inside of the symbols, don't worry, we're going to be coming over with another dark glaze later on, so that'll drop into there and darken that down. So adding a little bit more XV88 again, and I hate trying to do this for ratios, but basically it's like 2 parts XV88, 3 parts Mournfang Brown at this stage. I kind of just go by colour rather than like proper ratios. So essentially what you want to do is, if the paint, just add paint until it's brighter than Mournfang Brown but darker than XV88. So kind of just play around with those sort of ratios. The more and more you sort of do mixes like that, the more you'll get in your head of what it should be. But it doesn't, there isn't an exact sort of recipe for this. You kind of just learn sort of what color works, and you know, so the general rule of thumb is just add a little bit of the lighter tone to it to lighten your mix, and then work with that. You're still going to be going through several stages of this stippling to build up the texture, so different tones and different brightnesses works really well, because it'll just add more variety to the overall look of the piece itself. We're not really too worried about neatness at this stage. That will come when we start moving into the final highlights and we really sort of picking out areas. So just don't worry too much. Just go nuts. Have fun. So at this stage it's pretty much pure XV88, and I'm being really focused on this, so I'm really concentrating on the more uppermost parts of the curves, and at this point I just got a little bit of dry paint at the end of the brush. I had to clean that off, and like basically following the folds, and as you can see it's really like stippled. There's no sort of real proper edge highlights. And when you look at the model, you'll see like of all of the little sort of detail work. And what I'm doing is I'm basically just seeing where those lines and those cracks are, and then basically getting the highlight just underneath them and things. And every now and again, even into the sort of dark shaded areas, I'll put like a little highlight into that, just to sort of emphasize them, because those edges would still catch the light. And so just take your time and move around the uppermost areas and just sort of build up those highlights. You can do the odd highlight into the bottom part where it's a lot darker, but just take your time and just see where you need it, and you'll see it as it'll slowly emphasize and make the detail stand out and pop. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm getting a glaze of Mournfang Brown, and I'm just glazing over the uppermost parts of the sort of leather skirt. And the reason for this is I want to get that sort of rich brown colour brought back into it. and I don't know why I glazed that area because I haven't really highlighted that at that point. But what I want to do is I want to bring that richness back into it, and then I'm going back in now. This is where I start adding in Karnak stone into the XV88, and this is where I'm really starting to push those highlights, and really sort of bring the highlights out. So this is super focused. I'm really concentrating on where I'm placing these little dots and the scratches. I'm kind of aiming for underneath the sculpted in detail and down, and the folds and everything else on the side to sort of really bring out and enhance those details on the model. If you do make a mistake or you get paint where you don't think you need it, just get one of the previous darker shades and just stipple over the top, and that'll be perfectly fine. So you can see I'm kind of just taking my time looking around the model, seeing where the highlights are needed and just popping them in, and just this is really sort of following the sculpted in detail on the miniature. Now if that wasn't there, I would kind of just sort of enhance where some of the paint is darker than others, and kind of allow where the previous stippling has formed to sort of create those indentations and the blemishes in the leather, rather than like use the sculpted detail, kind of like you would do when you're like doing battle damage and things on Space Marine power armor. So this is pretty much like almost pure Karnak stone at this point. And this is like almost like getting to the final stages of the highlights, so really focusing on the uppermost parts, on the sharpest edges, underneath some of the most prominent sort of sculpted detail and things like that. You'll see as you do it, it really makes the detail on the model stand out, and it really pushes those edges and those highlights really well. I like this stage because this is when it all sort of falls in together and it looks really good, and you're like, yep, happy days. Actually think that this stage was pretty much pure Karnak stone now, looking back at it, because I kind of just was mixing it into my previous mix. But yeah, basically you just want it to be your lightest highlight, and then just go around and you'll see it. You can see it on the screen how everything just stands out and pops out. But that's pretty much it. You just work your way around all the leather and just build that up, and you'll get there. And I hope you've enjoyed this one. This guy is almost finished. And here it is at the front and at the back. Hope you liked it. I really enjoyed doing it. Love doing these kind of things. And I'll see you in the next video. And that's the video, everybody. For just a quick one, for the big leather strap that he has coming over his shoulder, I have another leather tutorial which is just up here somewhere. I'll try to get it linked in properly, and that's basically how I'm going to do that. But for the sort of more heavy scuffed up leather, this is perfect. The new Cities of Sigmar models are absolutely amazing. Really, really love them. There's going to be quite a few tutorials. There is going to be a tutorial for the Marshall. That's going to be over on my Patreon. I'm going to try to get a couple of videos up on there for my Patreon members. So if you do want to be to support me in other ways and get a little bit extra content, there is a link down below. I'm also going to be doing a tutorial for my actual colour scheme using one of the new steel helms, sort of just how I go about doing it for my army. And then I'll see if there's any other tutorials that I can sort of come up with the new range. The new range is absolutely just stunning. And I'm really going to have a lot of fun painting these up. So I hope you found this one really, really useful. If you do, please drop me a subscription below, like and comment on the video if you really want to, and make sure that you ring that bell so you don't miss out on any future content. And I'll see you in the next one, people. Goodbye.